Hello, friends. Welcome to another Golondrinas live session. I'm Laura Griego, Director of Education. Today, we're featuring our master carpenter, Ross Pope. Woodworking is one of the world's oldest and noblest professions, and one of great importance throughout the history of New Mexico, especially on a rancho like Las Golondrinas. Spanish colonists established the first Carpenters Guild in Mexico City in 1568, and woodworkers and furniture artists in the region now known as New Mexico appropriated aspects of the Spanish Guild system. One such adaptation was the customary practice of passing down trade secrets from father to son to maintain a strong family tradition. This custom is still practiced today. Spanish colonists needed lots of tools for frontier life and were in constant need of repairs. They also brought few pieces of furniture and so had to make their own. Carpenters would have made tables, chairs, chests, shelves, and more. Active in New Mexico from the very beginning of Spanish settlement, these artisans developed unique furniture styles while supplying the settlers with the furnishings and implements needed for frontier life. This New Mexico style is still popular today. Our carpenter shop here at El Rancho de las Golondrinas is a reconstruction using old logs from another structure and is in Trades Row, near our wheelwright and blacksmith shops, with whom a carpenter would have worked closely. Sometimes a carpenter would have acquired the additional skill of metalworking to service a variety of customers and needs in ranches or nearby towns. Up until the mid-19th century, most New Mexican furniture was constructed out of native woods, such as ponderosa pine and juniper, using basic hand tools. Increasing trade with Mexico, coupled with the opening of the Santa Fe Trail in 1821, introduced new tools and techniques into the region, thus creating new styles.
Hello, welcome to the Las Golondrinas Carpentry Shop. I'm Ross. I'm kind of the resident carpenter here at the ranch, and we have a makeup of a kind of a typical carpentry shop of about 1850. But I'm going to talk to you about the history of woodworking in New Mexico. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of woodworking in New Mexico. The first settlers, of course, came in the late 1590s, and with them there was one master carpenter by the name of Francisco Hernandez Cordero. Along with him came 6 other gentlemen who had some carpenter tools, but at least one full set of carpentry tools arrived with the original settlers. The importance of a carpenter was that he had the skills to do the building that was necessary when they first arrived. The skills were learned through a guild system that was well established in Europe and came to the Americas with the Spanish. The first guild was in Mexico, and it was the Carpenters Guild. To become a skilled carpenter or a master carpenter, it took 6 years apprenticeship. Once you became a master, you could have your own workshop. Within that system, there were 5 levels of cabinetry or carpentry that a carpintero could master. Everything from the basic joinery and making of doors and windows to instrument making, musical instruments. So there were different degrees. In the 1700s, after the Spanish returned to New Mexico, carpenters were scarce. They were very important. In fact, there's an account of 2 French traders who came into New Mexico from Louisiana that were captured when they showed up in Taos because it was against the law, of course, to trade with the Spanish at that time. But it turned out that they had carpentry skills, and the governor in Santa Fe, rather than send them south to the mines, kept them in Santa Fe and actually housed them so that they could produce furniture and doors and things that they needed here in Santa Fe. The Native Americans at that time, of course, they have a woodworking tradition of their own using stone tools, And there are accounts of stone tools actually being used up into the 1880s. The friars that came into New Mexico to convert the natives often brought tools with them to train Native American craftsmen with the iron tools. As the friars came north from Mexico to convert the Native Americans, they often brought with them a set of iron tools that were used to train the Native Americans in woodworking. The basic tools were the axe, which is common today, and the adze, which is basically an axe turned sideways. They would also have an auger, which was used for drilling holes. They would have a chisel, probably used primarily to make mortises, which are holes in wood for joinery. They would have a saw, maybe one similar to this, and they would have a plane, which is basically a way of smoothing the wood that they were working with. And of course, they would have had mallets and their basic everyday knife, of course, for doing the woodwork. So these were the basic kit that the Spanish crown actually supplied to the friars to bring north into New Mexico. So with those basic tools, they were able to produce the furniture that they needed at the time. The wood that was primarily used was ponderosa pine, which is the first large tree up the mountainside, large enough to make lumber out of. Here at Las Golondrinas, we have a lot of large cottonwood trees, which you might think would be useful in making furniture and things, but that type of wood was not used. It's a little hard to work with. It was used for the wheels and the wagon parts for the two-wheeled carts, which we call carretas. But the basic furniture that was used in households was all pine. They also didn't stain their wood. They pretty much left it all natural. Besides furniture, of course, the carpenters also made farm implements that were needed in the fields. Everyone's primary purpose in coming here was to grow food to sustain them. And being a carpenter might actually end up being a secondary thing that a person did. So with the cottonwood trees, making the carretas, and also using it in farm implements like plows and things of that. But primarily pine was the wood used to produce furniture. It was all very labor intensive. The first sawmill arrived in Santa Fe in 1847, brought here by the U.S. Army. Before that, everything was done totally by hand. Lumber was produced using a pit saw, and so it's very labor intensive to produce a board. Some of the early furniture pieces that were made, of course, were benches, which were very utilitarian in the home. And another item would be the chest, which is probably the basic piece of furniture produced in the beginning. Of course, they also made farm equipment such as plows, which were primarily wooden, reinforced by a piece of steel that would have been manufactured by the blacksmith. Small stools and benches, of course, were very important. And they used some very basic joinery that's been around for a very long time. For chests and things, everything from a large chest to a small box like this one are all put together with the same type of joint. This joint we call a dovetail joint, and it's one of the most basic joints used by carpenters. The other joint is a mortise and tenon joint, which when making frame items that have legs and cross members, this cross member comes all the way through this leg and comes out here. This is called a through mortise and tenon. The tenon is the part coming through, and the hole is called a mortise. That being the two most basic woodworking joints. So we talked earlier about the basic set of tools that a carpenter might bring to New Mexico. The first one and most important one was probably the axe. There are more axes mentioned in the inventories than any other tool. It was a very basic tool which was used for rough shaping. So there's something like 27 different types of axes. Everything from a basic small hand axe, which we are familiar with, to a felling axe, which is a little bigger, to the much bigger broad axe. Gets its name because it is so broad. And this was actually used for helping to square up timbers. So going from the axe, then the next tool down the list would be the adze. And you can see that it's basically an axe head turned sideways. This was used for smoothing up floors, squaring beams, and creating lumber, actually. And I'll show you how that's used down here. So this is called a foot adze, and it's used by swinging it between your legs. There are many other types of adzes. There are hand adzes that are used for shaping bowls and such. And it's the shape allows it to actually get down into the bowl and dig out the wood. You just have to watch your thumbs. The next important tool is probably the auger, which they used to drill holes. And there are, of course, different types of augers, and they come in all different sizes. And an auger is kind of the ultimate drilling tool. This is called a spoon bit. It was used at the same time period in the 1700s to also drill a hole. These were basically a basic tool that had to be turned by hand for a long time. Same way with this, these were used to create holes. It took a lot of force to get them started. That's how they made holes. From there, a basic tool would be the saw. Saws come in many different shapes and sizes, of course. This is called a bow saw. Uses very little steel. Steel was expensive and hard to come by, so they could ship a small amount of steel, and then the carpenter would make his wooden frame. And it's tensioned here just like a bow to keep the blade straight. The other tool was the chisel, of course. when again they come in many different sizes and shapes. One of the main purposes was to cut the tenons and the mortises in the furniture. If I was making a table leg like this one and I wanted this piece to fit into it, I have to make this hole. And to do that, it's a matter of using a chisel that is used to chop the hole out. So it takes a bit of time and patience, but eventually you would get the mortise. The other basic tool, of course, is the plane. It was used for the basic smoothing of a board, and it was basically a piece of wood with a chisel set into it so that it only comes through the bottom a very small amount. So it takes a limited amount of wood off to create a smooth surface. So we talked earlier about one of the basic joints being the dovetail joint, and it's basically creating a puzzle piece where the pieces are, this cutout is in the shape of a dove's tail. That's where it gets its name, and then the pins are cut to match that and creates a puzzle piece that basically only goes together one way. So we would create boxes or even chests that I showed you earlier by using that puzzle piece method. And that was, again, one of the more basic joints used at the time, and even today. So in the earlier colonial period, houses were furnished very sparsely. They didn't have a lot of movable furniture. They slept on the floor, they had built-in benches, everything was done at a lower elevation. When the Americans arrived in the 1840s, the local people began to see these new items, chairs and tables and things that they wanted those. So local carpenters started producing more and more of them. And New Mexico created its own style of furniture, which still exists today. You can see it anywhere in Santa Fe that you might go. So this museum helps you learn where that came from, how that style originated. You can come and see historical pieces here. You can come visit the carpenter shop and see the tools that would have been used during those time periods, and even today. So I hope to see you out here at the ranch, and we'll have a good discussion on what woodworking was like in the early days.
Well, friends, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us for another Golondrinas live session. We hope you enjoyed learning about carpentry and seeing Ross demonstrate his skills. We are so fortunate to have Ross as part of our interpretive team. For more videos, please visit the Las Golondrinas channel on YouTube and keep up with us on Facebook and Instagram at SF Golondrinas.